Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started talking about controlling your cravings, because we all get cravings. I know I do fairly often. I wish I didn't, but I do. So I get a lot of cravings, and so this is something, especially on Valentine's Day, when we sometimes specifically are getting sugar cravings, things like that, wanted to address this topic. And you guys wanted to learn about it based off of your Instagram votes this week. So here we go. Let's dive on in. Why do we get cravings? Well, there's really primarily 4 different reasons why we get cravings. The first is overconsumption. Second, unbalanced meals and snacks. Third is dehydration. If you guys have followed me along on this journey of monthly webinars, you know that dehydration pops up fairly frequently. So we're going to talk about it again today. And then finally, but definitely important, is deficiencies in vitamins and minerals specifically. So let's dive into each of those. Overconsumption. Overconsumption primarily is talking about carbohydrates. So it is talking about the carbohydrates that we consume, which is primarily our main source of fuel, especially as endurance athletes. So we have increased needs. We are going to make sure that we're getting those increased needs if we're doing workouts 1 to 3 hours per day. Now, what does that increased need look like? Well, the average American, and I'm jumping around here on the slide, but the average American recommendation is 3 to 5 grams per kilogram of body weight. So that can be anywhere from about 250 to around 350 or so grams per day of carbohydrates. Now, if you're like me, you don't measure out your food in terms of grams, but just to give you an idea of what that looks like, very different for an athlete, the very big difference comparative to what you're looking for. But as athletes, with this increased overconsumption, it is still considered an overconsumption. It's needed. It is a need that we have in specific times in our training. Now, this overconsumption is not needed during recovery. This recovery weeks. This is not needed in a low volume training period. This is not needed in a completely off season. There are different times when you need this type of overconsumption, but with that, we tend to get these cravings, specifically sugar cravings. This overconsumption of carbohydrates is part of the process of having sugar cravings. So that's where this is specifically talking about, is sugar cravings. Hope that kind of makes sense. The recommendation here is you definitely want to make sure that you're carb loading at specific times. So mainly around those long runs, so that Thursday, Friday before your long run or long ride, making sure you're really focusing on carbohydrates at those points, not necessarily on your recovery days. Your easy miles, you don't really need to be carb loading for those. So really kind of focusing on days of when those increased needs are going to be, to cut down on that sugar craving. Next, unbalanced meals. This is probably one of the most common for most people. What most of our meals tend to make up of these days is one macronutrient. And when I say macronutrient, I mean carbohydrates, fat, and protein. Those are the 3 macronutrients. And a lot of our meals only maybe contain one of those macronutrients, or are just very high in one and very low in the other 2. Great example is pasta. Pasta tends to be really high in carbohydrates, but by itself doesn't have a lot of protein at all and no fat. So when you eat pasta, you tend to still have cravings or still hungry, so you're never satisfied. This is a very common thing in the American diet. So we have to be really careful about making sure that we are really balancing our plate. And this goes back to something I talk about all the time, and it is building a performance plate. You want to make sure that you are building a performance plate. And you see down there in the slide plate, easy training, weight management, you can see a great example of like a balanced plate here. You got your protein, you got some whole grains, and fats are definitely in there as well. So you're making sure that there's all of these components. And if you look at that dish as well, you see that there's also a good amount of vegetables. Vegetables are gonna add a little bit of fiber. Also, talking about vitamins and minerals, they're going to add those as well, and also just make you feel fuller for longer. So building your plate with all of these aspects, carbs, fat, protein, and fiber, are going to help ultimately satisfy you, which also controls your cravings. If you are providing your body with all of the nutrients it needs, because it needs all of those nutrients in one way or another, for different functions throughout the body, and especially as an athlete, you want to make sure that you're including all 4 of those things, building your snacks and your meals around it. The picture there with the breakfast bowl, that has your avocados, your eggs, your black beans, some greens in there, and then some brown rice. That is going to keep you satisfied for longer. You're not going to have to worry about necessarily getting hungry or having cravings for other foods. Next, dehydration. Dehydration is so common these days. And I don't mean because it's wintertime, because if you attended my hydration webinar a few months ago, I talked about how in wintertime we actually deal with more dehydration than we do in the summertime, because we think that we're not sweating as much, that we're not in as much need of hydration. False. We need just as much hydration in the wintertime as we do in the summertime. So more often than not, you're under consuming. You might be getting pretty close to your hydration needs, but your water intake is probably still pretty low to where it should be, especially as athletes. Daily hydration for just an individual who's not sweating, now think about it, not sweating or anything like that, and not really doing a whole lot of movement or activity, is 1 milliliter per kilocalorie consumed. So that is what the general hydration recommendations are going to be. Now for athletes, that is increased. That it means that if you're consuming 2,000 calories, the average recommendation, which if you're an athlete, you probably should be having a little bit more, but that's a whole nother topic, then you should be having at least 2 liters of water every day, plus whatever your workout hydration is. And I have a next slide. I have a wonderful table that I love using with all of my clients and athletes about in-workout hydration. So my recommendation to meet these increased needs is to carry a water bottle and track your intake to really see how much water you're truly drinking. Because like I said, more often than not, you're probably not consuming enough water, which could ultimately be impacting the cravings that you have. Here is that wonderful table that I love to use, hydration table. That everyday recommendation, and then we get into the workout. So if you have a workout 2 to 3 hours before competition, set at least 17 fluid ounces, at least. So a lot of times that might be 1 squeeze bottle in 2 to 3 hours before. Immediately prior to the competition or training, 6 to 12 fluid ounces, so maybe a little more than half of what's in your water bottle. And then every 15 to 20 minutes during a training session or a competition, you want to be intaking 6 to 12 fluid ounces. That's every 15 to 20 minutes. So typically, if you've heard me talk about like that exercise longer than an hour, we want to be including carbohydrates. That does not necessarily include your hydration. Your hydration is before that hour. So if you only have a workout that lasts 1 hour, so 60 minutes, your hydration is still at a high need. Some people don't drink water, and I've been there. I 100% get it. They maybe don't have a water bottle with them. If you're only going out for an hour run, you don't feel like you maybe need it. in that moment, you need to make sure that if that's the case, that when you come home, you are rehydrating properly. Because if you just ran for an hour, that's 15 minutes. That's 4 15-minute cycles. So if you're doing that top end, that means that you need to have 48 fluid ounces in that hour run, especially if it was a like very hot, sweaty type of run, or even, I don't know about you guys, but in the wintertime, I sweat a whole lot underneath in like my base layers. So you want to make sure your rehydration, because you see there after an exercise, 24 ounces for every single pound lost during a competition or training run or a cycling competition, anything like that. You want to make sure that you are getting your fluids back, because you will recover faster. Always love talking about that recovery, but you will also make sure that you are staying hydrated to curb those cravings. Last, but 100% not least, deficiencies. So deficiencies are more often than not what might be causing, especially in athletes, causing cravings. So there's lots of tables out there where they tell you like what types of things are you're craving, what the cause is or lack of is causing that craving. And then I love this table because it gives you an alternative to what that craving is. The most common ones that I look at and that are obviously most common in athletes, the first is magnesium. So if we're craving chocolate, which happy Valentine's Day, chocolate, it might be that you're not craving the sugar in there, but you're craving the magnesium content. So instead of having a milk chocolate, you can have a little bit of dark chocolate, or as this table says, some raw cacao nibs with some whole grains. And even I like this table too because it puts a great little recipe there that you can maybe kind of attempt. So like some brownies with some dark cacao powder, things like that. And as athletes, magnesium is so important. It is like it's becoming more talked about, but the unannounced, unspoken about electrolyte that we need. So we talk about sodium and potassium all day long, but magnesium has come to find out in a lot of research, so important for our muscle contraction that we need. So we definitely need this. So if you are craving that dark chocolate or chocolate in general, maybe it's a magnesium thing. So maybe that's something you need to look into, because you might satisfy that craving with some dark chocolate. Second one is calcium. So you see here in the table, fizzy drinks. A lot of times people will find an alternative to that if they're craving calcium with sparkling water, which is so popular these days. You have bubbly, you have LaCroix, all of those things. But calcium is definitely something that as athletes we need for a lot of functions throughout our bodies. So you want to make sure that you're getting that calcium. Not necessarily, you're not going to get it from those fizzy drinks. That's just what we're craving. You're going to get it from soy and almond milks. So you can make a smoothie like the table says there. So you want to make sure you're getting your calcium. If you don't get calcium from dairy products, you can 100% get calcium from, like I said, soy or almond milk. Broccoli has a good amount of calcium in it too, so you can get calcium from your vegetables as well. So just be aware of where you're getting your food, what you're getting from your food, basically how it's fueling your body. Next is zinc. Also very important, but as you see, the craving for a deficiency in zinc is red meat. So I don't know about you guys, but I will sometimes crave like a hamburger or crave a steak. And for me, that's when I know like I need some zinc in my life. I need to maybe up whatever I'm doing and make sure I have some zinc. So dried fruit can provide that. You can make some homemade granola. You can get that from there. So there's a lot of different options for getting enough zinc inside your diet. And then finally, omega-3s. So important. We sometimes crave maybe fatty foods. And so like a lot of times fatty foods can be anything that's like greasy, or, the burger I mentioned, there could be compounding factors of what I may be deficient in that moment. So omega-3s, you can get this from fish and seafood. So you want to make sure that you're, getting those fatty acids, those omega-3 fatty acids, so important for anti-inflammatory, for recovery, for just so many functions throughout the body as an athlete. So you want to make sure that you're getting those omega-3s throughout the day. Athletes, for all of these cravings, these lack of nutrients, we need more. We need more than what the recommended daily amount is that is recommended for the average American. As athletes, we are not average Americans. We have increased needs. So if you tend to find yourself craving chocolate more often than not, you have increased needs of magnesium. You have increased needs for calcium, especially that bone health. You have increased needs for omega-3s. Understand that. And really find that recommendation I have is feed the deficiency, not the craving. So understanding your food, and I do this with a lot of my clients, is educating them on the mindfulness of why they're craving something and why they're thinking what they're feeling in that moment, because it's so important to recognize what that craving is before just like grabbing for whatever you think that craving is saying, without actually identifying the nutrients that are actually in our food that fuel us, and viewing it as, my body's telling me I need something. It's telling me that I haven't provided it with something. It's telling me exactly what I need. So listen to it and feed the deficiency, not the craving. Find those healthy alternatives, be able to balance those cravings, and really be able to learn how to fuel your body properly. Now, with all of this being said, and I think deficiencies, especially when it comes to these vitamins and minerals, also known as micronutrients, those are so important for us as athletes. And more often than not, I have found that athletes tend to have some sort of deficiency in a lot of these areas. Vitamin D is a big one, and then magnesium, like I said. So I'm really excited to announce that I'm now offering vitamin and mineral testing. This is a really great offer to be able to provide my athletes and my clients, is this opportunity to get testing to see where your deficiencies are. I promise I did not necessarily do this control craving webinar because I started offering this just recently, but it works out perfectly. It is a great tool that can be covered by insurance, that allows you to get the data back to know exactly, like, are you deficient in vitamin D? Are you deficient in magnesium? Are you, how is your body metabolizing carbohydrates? We can find out all those things based off of the vitamins and minerals that are abundant or not abundant in your body. So this testing is available now through me. So if you are interested, feel free to reach out about it. I will be posting it soon on my website, but I wanted to let you guys know that it is something that I'm offering now. So any questions? I went through a ton of information right there, but I wanted to really cover deep into all of the things that could be contributing to controlling your cravings, what could be causing them, and then the recommendations for how to actually adhere to them, actually recognize them, actually control them in those moments. And realistically too, I always like to say this, sometimes it's not about controlling them, because like I said, it is literally your body telling you it needs something. So listen to your body. That's the first and foremost thing I can always recommend, is you want to listen to your body. You want to make sure that you are really giving it all the fuel that it needs. So at